every reporter, his opinion is going into the piece.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
I don't see the divide between opinion and reporting as clear-cut, black and white as a lot of people do.
How do they mix? Do they mix? Should they mix?
There's Adam Clymer, Major League asshole from New York Times.
The New York Times, it used to be the absolute beacon of straightforward reporting.
The New York Times, I mean, how can you tell the difference between the opinion journalism and the news pages?
Donald Trump.
I think journalism just completely abandoned any pretense at objectivity.
You're a third-rate reporter, and what you just said is a disgrace.
Some executive at the New York Times actually said this, that Trump is such an existential threat that the usual rules of journalism need not apply.
These days, a lot of people complain about media bias.
When you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
But it's not just conservatives. Liberals complain about it too.
Good, affordable health care might seem like a fanged threat to the freedom of the American people on Fox News. It turns out it's working pretty well in the real world.
For decades, the media tried to assume a posture of objectivity, of non-bias.
Instead of merely reporting news, the editorial writer analyzes it, often expressing his personal opinions.
When newspapers expressed viewpoints, they did so in opinion sections separate from their news coverage.
The New York Times, it used to be the absolute beacon of straightforward reporting, and the journalists who worked there were not allowed to inject their personal opinions, and didn't. You know, Abe Rosenthal, the legendary editor at the time, said to me, I interviewed there one time for a job I didn't ultimately take, and he said that, you know, when he was gone, he wanted people to say of him, he kept the paper straight. It's on his gravestone.
In those days, most Americans got their national news from a handful of elite print outlets and the big three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The national media, which was heavily consolidated, had tremendous power because they were the arbiters of what Americans knew. News anchors like Walter Cronkite of CBS were household names and could change public opinion with a single segment.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
Today, the big three networks no longer have that kind of power, but still reach millions of people. There's also the hidden influence of other elite media outlets, which shape how other journalists report the news.
The New York Times, for instance, I think sets the agenda for all newsrooms around the country.
But this highly concentrated, ostensibly neutral media is the exception to the rule. In fact, the newspaper that Devine works for, the New York Post, was founded by Alexander Hamilton in response to his political opponent, Thomas Jefferson, winning the presidency.
Embarrassed but refusing to let himself or his party be sidelined, Hamilton met with Federalists at Gracie Mansion and raised enough funds to start what is still today the nation's oldest continuously published daily newspaper.
Such were the times. When Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States in the 1830s, he was amazed to find that the American media was local and decentralized. Quote, "Nothing is easier than to set up a newspaper," he wrote, noting that the number of media outlets in the country, quote, "surpasses belief." He was also struck by the bias. The first newspaper Tocqueville read described Andrew Jackson as, quote, "a heartless despot. He governs by means of corruption, and his immoral practices will redound to his shame and confusion," unquote. In today's internet age, much of the American media has reverted to form.
Is Donald Trump really a fascist?
I think journalism just completely abandoned any pretense at objectivity. Some executive at the New York Times actually said this, that Trump is such an existential threat that the usual rules of journalism need not apply.
It's shifted from reporting in the news to advocating one side and only telling one side of the story?
Yeah, I do think so. And look, I have a kind of unique perspective because I'm now an opinion columnist. I was a reporter. So an opinion columnist has this great luxury of being able to just promote one side of an argument. And there's so much opinion journalism now. And it used to be separate from the news. And now I think, read the New York Times, I mean, how can you tell the difference between the opinion journalism and the news pages? And a lot of publications are like that now. So it's overlapped.
If it's overlapped, Then what's the proper role opinion should play in reporting? To answer our question, we spoke with our advisory board member, Tim Carney, who explained how the College Fix helps aspiring journalists learn to balance opinion with reporting.
How do they mix? Do they mix? Should they mix?
I don't see the divide between opinion and reporting as clear-cut, black and white as a lot of people do. I'm Tim Carney. I'm the senior columnist at the Washington Examiner.
What you're doing here is a typical media trick.
I often say a columnist is a reporter who admits his opinions.
Hang on, Tim, because you're kind of in my house here.
A good columnist is an opinion writer who does reporting. And so I think opinion writers who don't go out and dig up new facts, who aren't informing their readers with facts they didn't yet know, aren't doing as much of a service as they could be.
In his role as a columnist, Carney's expected to express opinions.
Because you're actually irritating me right now, I'm going to be honest with you.
But he says coverage from straight news reporters is also colored by bias.
So, first of all, every reporter, his opinion is going into the piece. Hopefully he's seeing all sides, he's getting all perspective, he's not hiding facts or making stuff up or overemphasizing.
So you mean like an actual news reporter
Yes.
who's supposed to have no opinions maybe or disguise opinions is still opinionated?
I think reporters, they're all obviously coming from a perspective, and admitting that perspective is often beneficial to the reader.
Subtle bias can come in various forms. In 2022, when a man attempted to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, the New York Times editors buried it deep inside the paper on page A20. The year previous, the Times quietly retracted the word unsubstantiated from an article referencing Hunter Biden's laptop. But most of all, subtle bias influences story selection.
So, we can all sit around doing this, and we do this, conservatives do this to the mainstream does this to conservatives, like, why are you writing about X but not Y and Z? Why did you do this and not that? Well, on some level, it's like, because I felt like it? I don't know, this is what was interesting to me, and I can't cover all things.
Critics have accused Reason's Robby Soave of bias in the stories he chooses to report on.
I'd be accused of only writing about conservatives being canceled, which is never true. I absolutely, time and time again, wrote about left people or pro-Palestinian people who were canceled or something like that I thought was unfair. I write about it. Zero credit given to me for this exercise in intellectual honesty, but I still do it. But it's like eating my broccoli or something, because no one wants to give you any credit for actually doing that. So I just do it for my own integrity.
So then what's the answer? If it's impossible not to have bias, how should reporters approach their stories?
Should they try to be objective?
I mean, the concept of objectivity is a complicated one in media. What I always say is you're reporting from a particular perspective. And so you should try to see it from as many perspectives as you possibly can. Try to see it from a perspective that you don't agree with. And then you can better tell the story.
Hello again, John Miller here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe. Also visit our website at The College Fix. If you're a student and you'd like to join The College Fix and try out journalism, find the button on our homepage and an editor will contact you. We got more videos coming, please stay tuned.